Hey there, my name's Rod Yates. Welcome to Mastering Events, an Audience Republic podcast. Each episode, I'll be talking to some of the world's most accomplished event professionals to discover how they got where they are today, the lessons they've learned throughout that journey, and their insights around event marketing and maximizing ticket sales. My guest today is Ben Allen, Marketing Director at Live Nite Events, a full-service entertainment company that deliver events across Utah, Florida, Nevada, and Maryland. In 2023 alone, they will produce around 400 events, including festivals such as Reggae Rise Up and Gasparilla, while also operating multiple venues such as Soundwell and Granary Live. Ben's path into event marketing was anything but a straight line, and at one point, he was even focused on becoming a war correspondent. We talk about that journey in this interview, as well as Ben's strategies for selling tickets during a cost of living crisis, how he markets 400 events and makes sure he hits the right audience for each, effective ways of capturing and using data, and much more. But we started by going all the way back to Ben's upbringing and the first show he ever saw.
My mom took me front row to see the Eagles.
Wow!
I was young, and I still have the concert stub, yeah. I don't necessarily remember the concert as much, but I do remember the energy around it, or that experience as a whole, right? There's bits and pieces and Henley and that there's these glimpses, shimmers that come through. But I was probably just going into middle school.
Was there an awakening at some point to the fact that, so you've got the Eagles on stage, but behind the stage, there's also, obviously people putting on the show, but there's this whole network of things that have to happen to get that show happening. Was there a moment where it kind of dawned on you that, maybe that world exists and I want a piece of it?
It definitely wasn't then. And if there was a singular moment, I'm not sure. Music was always a huge part of my life, don't get me wrong, but I had this grand plan that I was going to, my whole family's science and medicine, and so I don't necessarily think I was like this raw creative person or had that's who I was. I think I just was determined to be different. I was like, I've got to be the black sheep. It's
right.
What I need to do. And so I had this plan. My sister gave me 2 books in middle school around that same time period that were probably not what she should have given me then, but Kitchen Confidential and Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. And so like between Bourdain and Tom Wolfe, I sat on, we had this pond behind our house, and I remember sitting on that pond on this old stone bench and reading those books, and I had this grand plan that I was going to make documentaries that got people to activate their social responsibility and change the channel, get off the couch and change the channel. And I was going to document the human condition, finding normalcy in conflict. And I was going to be some mixture of like the Ken Kesey, Tom Wolfe days with Bourdain in conflict zones. And then I kind of stuck with that forever. Like that's what I was doing. As I got into like high school and through that, I wanted to understand the mountains like I did the water. I wanted to make ski videos that changed the world, and then just become a war correspondent, because that's how life works, and it's just this really simple little switch. Right. And so I, full of angst and everything, I was like, well, I'm going to Utah, right? Like, what's the most radical, finger in the sky you can do? Full of angst, like to your New England Jewish family, like I'm gonna go dip out to Utah, and when I came out here, we made some ski videos. I don't think I changed the world. We had a good time for sure through undergrad and grad school, but in that whole process of coming out here, I got linked with a group of friends who had started. I guess the best way to describe this would be, they were a group of really good friends who became good friends of mine. And they before my introduction to them, a few of them played in a band called Wisebird. And when they were a few years older, when they split off and went to college across the country, they would come back around in the fall. And it was kind of always this like, Wisebird's going to play, and we're going to get our friends and we're going to go down to the desert and we're all going to catch up and have a good time. And after a few years, it started growing. And as it grew, it was like, oh, wow, there's like a few hundred people coming down to hang out now. Oh, there's like almost 1,000 people. And so they're like, we should turn this into a music festival, or like formalize it a little bit more. And so I came in on that side. I was like the third in this group that was helping operate it. And so you're kind of doing a little everything. And I don't want to, like, no delusions of grandeur here, right? Like, these were really boutique, few thousand people a day, transcendental festivals.
Sure.
But so I'm in film school. I'm like helping out with these, and there's something that I was so set on video and documentary and conflict zone and this, and music was just something I really enjoyed. And then it was like being around this kind of behind the stage, as you say, with these events. And I started shooting more photos. So I started documenting that, and there was something that I connected with in that. It's not even apples to oranges. It's fruits to carbohydrates. It's such a different connection. But for me, I was inside the window. I wasn't looking from the outside, and it was a generation that I connected with. They were facing their own seemingly insurmountable challenges with music, right? And that affect of environment, that release, that connection, that really got my wheels turning. So the whole start of my, what is still a fledgling career in this industry really was around the content side of it. And it was right as Facebook albums were getting big. So I started trying to make this business model around documenting my generation's, element of human condition in music, but it was less about just shooting the artist for me, and more about telling a story of, here's how the artist is involved with the environment. Here's how the environment holds all of this together, but primarily here's how people are connecting to that music. I kind of had this whole shtick, like, I'm not going to take your picture if you pose. It was this really, if your photos, this kappa, like, if your photos aren't good, you're not close enough. I can't be the voyeur fly on the wall. I have to be in the cut with everything. And through that process of doing that is where I originally met Vaughn, who founded, all the companies we have in this portfolio now. And he was the first person to kind of see my art and see the value in it and put me on, right? And this sense of, I believe in this, I believe in you. I don't know exactly where it's going to go or how it fits in, but we're going to make it work and we're going to figure it out. And one thing led to another, and now I'm here.
That's wow. That's quite the journey. So where does marketing fit into all that? How do you go from photography to marketing?
Yeah, so educationally, my background was content and marketing. It was always something that was spinning there, and it was something that I did devote some time educationally to. I just got so caught up, and I was doing the music thing, and then from there I went and was working with a number of other national global brands, and I spent a lot of time working as an external employee, but essentially full-time for Red Bull. And that was a whole other leg of the journey that just taught me more than I could ever imagine. But then it was hectic, right? I was traveling a ton, and almost the entire year. And in 2018, there were kind of some things on this side of, we're rebranding a nightclub as what's now our concert venue, Soundwell, and we're going to take a more serious approach to the festivals and all this stuff. And it just made a lot of sense that was the time to think about a pivot. And where my head was at was, I understand as much as I'm going to understand in this moment about the content side. I really want to challenge myself to the dissemination of it, to the strategy, to the, activating content for a singular or plural purpose.
Before we just jump into Live Night and follow up what you've been saying there, just touching on one of the things you mentioned with Red Bull was that you learned a lot. Is there a key lesson, just something that really sticks out with you about what you learned from your time at Red Bull that has helped you with your job today?
I don't know if there's one singular lesson I learned from, I mean, the power of the team is from them. I think between that and then someone like Vaughn constantly reminded me, like, end of the day, it's cocktails and concert tickets, right? Like, we're in the experience economy. So, I mean, that's, a lot of my biggest lessons were just like, breathe, think through it on a binary, if this, then that, step at a time, and trust the team, and trust the vision, and trust that if you got the right people there for the right reasons, that something magic's going to happen.
Nice. And you mentioned Vaughn, so let's skip now into your work with Live Nite Events. You're a prolific company, but you're also an independent company, which I think is really interesting. There must be challenges that you face that are unique to being an independent company. What are some of those challenges that you think are unique to what you face? I mean, and also how are you sort of overcoming them?
As an independent, there's challenges all the time, right? Like, I mean, let's be real, right? We all play in this sandbox beneath a couple giants, especially in the US. Do we always have the same resources? Do we always have the same bandwidth and the same team, and all of that as some of these larger companies? No, absolutely not. And then that presents challenges, but we're here across the board. We're here because we're passionate about it. It's what we love more than anything. And there's a certain grit and determination that comes from, like, when you're here to make it work doing something you love, there tends to not be a lot of, I'm here for this as a job, right? You don't get the same, I'm here to clock in, I'm here to clock out. Everyone that we're surrounded with is highly passionate about what we do, and that makes a huge difference. And it's fun. If life were easy, it'd be really boring.
Right.
And so the ingenuity that comes with it, whether it comes down to booking power and routings and that, to, as I mentioned before, resources and everything, it can be a little bit of a different playing field at times, but that's what we're here to do is figure it out and keep the independent spirit strong.
Yeah, nice. I guess one challenge which every promoter faces, whether you're independent or one of the big players, is trying to sell tickets when economic times are uncertain, when there are cost of living crises. That's difficult. How have you had to adjust your marketing strategies because of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like any of us in this industry are marketing one product for 2 years and have this ramp to figure out what works and what doesn't and adjust things in there. Right. We're, for us, we're marketing 400 different products a year on a 30 to 90 day timeline, right? So it's a lot of rapid iteration. It's a lot of understanding when to move on and figuring out when is the right time to really roll up your sleeves and put some elbow grease in. Obviously, we're talking about the pandemic and life since then, right? Like, people's spending habits have changed, their lifestyles have changed, how they react to marketing strategy as a whole has changed, what they're interested in has changed. And so it's hard to say there's like one formula that we've applied to everything, but I think on a show-by-show basis, it's looking from the top level. Is this a soft ticket or a hard ticket show, right? Like, does this have the demand enough to sell hard tickets, or are we talking about a soft ticket play where now we're getting, we just want to get people into the room, and are we having those conversations early on? That being said, like, there's still, and the numbers speak to it, there's still a really high demand for experiences. In terms of strategy and that, I think a lot of it for us became more of an educational element, more of finding a way to connect with the audience with that music, and in less words say or show why somebody needed to experience it. But for the venue side, I think it also helped to continue highlighting the community around our venues. Sometimes it wasn't as much about the specific music as much as it was about getting out and celebrating and being around that community. So a lot of the tactics, the channels, things like that were very similar, but the messaging and the content and the way we would push that out, I think would change a little bit.
You mentioned, I think it was something like 400. You're on track to deliver 400 events in 2023.
Yeah,
a lot
around there.
of events. And if you think, I was just looking at your calendar, in August alone, you've got a really varied array of artists from, let me see, Youngblood to Ludacris to Revolution to Sister Hazel. So potentially, very different audiences across some of those artists. How do you approach segmenting your audience to ensure that your message is reaching the Sister Hazel fan and the Youngblood fan, and it's reaching the right people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with trying to be as anal about data capture and organization as possible. For us, it's always started with a pretty granular level of tagging, right? And so you'll have your identifiers such as where it is and when it is, what type of event, but we will generally, across all of our events, at all times, we will try and tag and categorize, whether it's all ages, 18 plus, 21 plus, what genre it is, what subgenre it is, ethnic or geographic affiliations into what type of event, concert versus festival, indoor, outdoor. And so the idea would be, as this data comes in, or at the start of collecting data on each show, you've got your baseline tags, identifiers that you're assigning to it, and you keep a fairly standard system of categories across the board. That will help us make correlations later. But at the end of the day, too, it's a bit about the team instinct. And as someone on my team recently told me, sometimes there's really no strategy. It's just a vibe. And it's true. Sometimes I think some of the most powerful marketing comes from having the data on one side, but also having the instinct and having the background knowledge and being able to make a gut decision on something. Sometimes the data might point to, this is how you should approach something with a economic driven sales promotion, and your gut is telling you that the fans just want something that makes them feel involved, right? And you run off that gut instinct, and you wind up, it'd be tough to compare. You can't really A/B test that, but you wind up with a higher return than you necessarily wanted or expected. So for us, it's been collecting as much data as possible, trying to make sure that, as you said, we are hitting the right people, because we don't want to fatigue our audience. It's the same thing with Reggae. We do this festival in multiple markets. I can't imagine how tired people would get if I'm emailing everyone on our Florida list, Maryland and Vegas and Utah stuff all the time. Like, it's just not relevant. So trying to understand where those points are, where crossover is warranted, and making sure that all those different communities stay in the loop with the larger picture, but not wearing them out. And then just making sure you have enough data points to hit, right? Like, I want to be able to very quickly, go to something and say, okay, awesome, Common Kings just announced. I need to be able to hit all past Common King shows, but I need to filter out all the other markets, right? All the way down to support. Sometimes those, you might have support headline in a market and only sell a few hundred tickets, and then you've got them on a larger tour, but in an on sale, in a maintenance period, in any phase of the cycle, an extra couple hundred tickets can really make or break some snowball growth and word of mouth and that.
Yeah. I mean, with data capture, how are you finding the most effective way to capture it? Because, I mean, obviously you have ticket history, past attendance history. You can see what shows people have been to.
Sell tickets.
Right, we'll sell tickets.
Number one, man, sell more tickets.
But there's also that thing with the ticket buying process. How many questions do you ask? How much data do you try and ask before someone presses buy? How do you balance that? I want your data, but I also don't want you to abandon this because I've asked you too many questions.
Distill it down, right? It's like, how easily can I get enough data points to make a custom audience and communicate with you in the right ways? So, right, like, how can I communicate with you via email, SMS, and build a social audience, based off your information? which sounds so manipulative when we say it like this, but the reality is, like, it's the same as you start seeing like app tracking transparency and all of this stuff. Like, I don't want to hit people that don't want to see my ads, right? Like, I don't want to waste money if you're not likely to buy a ticket. That's a waste of my money and your time.
Right.
So everything comes with this, like, I want to sell you a ticket to a concert that you want to be at. And so when you come to like how much data, ticket sales, number one, I'm always going to say that. Sell more tickets, right? When it comes to what you collect there, we've experimented with that over time as well, right? Like phone numbers, one thing. Now it's becoming much more like, oh yeah, I'll throw my phone number into the pot. But it's kind of historically been, okay, what's the value of what we're giving you? And where do we put that line in there, right? Like historically, we haven't always collected phone numbers with concert tickets. And part of that too was SMS marketing for us, and was a smaller component, but also was like, we don't want to ask for too much. We also, contests are have always been, part of our bread and butter. It's really easy to ask for somebody's phone number when we're giving away a large festival prize. When I'm giving away a couple like club or theater tickets, then no, I'm going to leave the phone number off, right? And I'll hope that I get, maybe I get the 4 points of data, your first name, your last name, your email address, and maybe I'll throw your birthday in because we got to age verify. It's a 21 plus show. Like, so there's your, we can disguise that easily. There's your 4 points, and then I'm going to keep you in the funnel, and I'm going to keep retargeting to you with direct marketing as I can. And then when you buy a ticket, maybe you buy it to something that does collect your number, and we just start collecting these points of data over time, and hoping that in the process of that, we're not pushing them out the door, right? And so monitoring how people react to our marketing in terms of your standard paid metrics, but into emails, like going through collections of emails by subject and how many people are opening, how many people are clicking, where are they clicking, right? Is everybody getting stuck at the first image, or is everybody going down to the bottom, and where are those patterns? And you can compile as much insight into that as possible, but some of it also is just kind of having a gut and a conversation with the team of, we've run these 5 campaigns through email, and we've seen a similar pattern, and it's working, keep it up, or it's not, so let's adjust.
What patterns do you see working with email? Is it that people get stuck on the first image? Is it that they actually go to the bottom? What do you find works?
So I actually, I gotta give credit. I stole it from Pitchfork, but they kind of started running a lot of what's in your subject preview line, and what seems to be your top level, they'll throw down at the bottom. That was a whole experiment of ours. When it comes to a generalized email, let's say our general newsletter, and we've got a big giveaway that we're including in there, let's throw the meat at the bottom and keep it up in the subject line and see how many people go down to it. It works. Sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what you're putting in front of them, right? But in terms of emails overall, I think what I've noticed with our festival audience is we're getting really high engagement rates when we add human experience, when we add fan content, real connection to the experience, to the festival property, to between the fan and the artist, and that together. On the concert side, it depends. It's hard to put any specific rhyme or reason. Our strategy has generally been, there are certain newsletters that we want to be informational boards, right? Like, especially monthly. We want to make sure every month our fan base is getting something that's distilled, that is easy to digest. This is everything that's coming up, still curating it, right? And but this is everything coming up you should care about. And when it comes to individual shows and driving that, I do still think, people are looking for points of connection. So adding, yes, we want to sell tickets, but having external links in those emails that drive to new music videos, news story, external news about an artist, past photos of an artist, things like that, sometimes you can push people outside of your little garden, and they'll come back in to buy the ticket.
So you're just giving people value, right? That's what you're
trying
providing.
to, and education, and education's wrong, but it sounds wrong in that context. But yes, I want to. There's also sometimes where we'll have an artist, and and this is what takes the team. It's hard with 400 events, but the team understanding who's playing, right? And we're really fortunate to have a group of talent buyers who just love and understand the music. And so even if it's something that's new to my radar or new to my team's radar, like, the people who booked it have a really great connection with what it is, what it's been doing, where they're headed. And I don't think that's the most common thing. We have a really, really savvy group of people buying shows. But I think that with that, people want to understand what they're seeing. And I think sometimes an audience, or you believe an audience would resonate with something really well, right? It can be as simple as we've got a traditional country artist that's from a similar region as a more blues-focused artist, right? And like that person that we're hitting on our blues list might not necessarily be on the country list, but through talking to people, through listening to it, starting to think, okay, cool, like these guys might vibe, and that's where you'll build an email. We will build an email that's got a music video on it, that's got a little bit longer descriptor in it, that's got links to their Spotify, right? And like, yeah, right. Here's where you can get a ticket, but hey, man, like, take the ride first and then buy the ticket and check it out and see if it's for you, and we'd love to have you. And then beyond that too is like, you can't overlook rewarding loyalty, right? We have fans that come out to a lot of shows and are our rock. And so it's the other part too is making sure that we reward that loyalty and show appreciation for our fans over time, right? And so in the same sense, like, hey, you were at this show, and even if this one's, selling well enough, like, we want to open up some of our allotted comps and send that out first come, first serve. Like, even if it's just 10, 20 tickets, here's 10 or 20 tickets to this past fan base just as a thank you. That's something that I don't ever want to overlook, because we would not, live night events, Reggae Rise Up, Reline Group, everything we do, we wouldn't exist without the fans.
When you think about the channels that you use, the digital channels, the social channels that you use to promote all your events, what determines which channel you think you'll put more focus on? Is it the genre of what you're promoting, or is it the fact that it's a show as opposed to a festival, i.e. the location? What kind of guides which channel you think is going to be most effective for each event?
It's definitely a mixture of the genre. It's also the demographic, and specifically the age demographic. But there are some things that aren't consistent within that. Overall, right, like electronic music for us, specifically house music and Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, rest in peace. House music and Twitter, it's still Twitter to me. House music and Twitter go hand in hand, right? Even beyond that, electronic music, but specifically house and Twitter, it's just like, that's a really hand-in-hand relationship. Most things like Instagram, Meta, for better and worse, it's a real love-hate relationship. Meta is still dominant. A lot of things have pushed onto Instagram heavy, right? Almost everything indie across the landscape is way more, and everything that skews younger, way more popular on, or way easier to market on Instagram. And there are some exceptions to that. Reggae, however, yes, we do well on Instagram, but Facebook is still a really strong platform for us. And our demographic, age-wise on Facebook still is young to old. So, that's one of the ones where age, I think for us, matters less, and genre matters more. And then obviously, like, TikTok has become there's the elephant in the room. That's been a big push of ours to make a bit more presence on there. Their ads manager is still, it's just different, and figuring out the kinks on that. Their whole business center is like, it seems like they're starting to refine things, but you don't get the granular targeting, and it's just not as powerful or robust as Meta is. But in terms of organics and that, right, it's like there's country stuff that's just smashing on TikTok, right? These sounds that get picked up, pop, especially some of this like indie alternative and pop, and into some electronic and hip hop. But there's things there that are just absolutely crushing on TikTok. Everything's a little bit, it depends on who you're looking at and what they're listening to.
Can you estimate where you think the majority of your sales come from in terms of either whether it's one of these channels or whether it's more direct to fan communication? Do you have a ballpark idea?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been heavy on paid digital. I think that paid digital and Meta specifically is where the majority of our sales are converted. Where they come from, where they start, I mean, that's hard to pin down, especially over these past few years. We email a lot, like we have a really large email program, right? And hundreds of thousands of subscribers across, and we value that and we utilize it, especially since migrating over into Audience Republic. We've been building up our SMS platform, our program, a lot stronger, but the direct one-to-one marketing, that's a huge component for us. The goal would be to make those 6 impressions with a few different layers. Like, yeah, we've backed off some street level and physical marketing, but we still have an active street team. Some of them have migrated to, kind of becoming more digitally focused, but we still run posters. We still run handbills for large and focused events. We still buy radio when it makes sense. We still, buy physical, whether it's programmatic or digital billboard. We still do some print publications and some alt weeklies, and so it's trying to balance all these layers. But generally, I think the conversions come from that, those impressions we make digitally, and that specifically Meta. It's really. And I hope TikTok catches up there, and I think it's moving in that direction a bit. But with Meta, it's really easy for us to, with the right amount of time and thought, to get down into that lower funnel. And, whether it's just strategic pools of people and exclusionary audiences of purchases, and we're able to really hone in and target somebody highly likely to buy.
You mentioned at the beginning of our chat that I think you're already looking at Reggae Rise Up 2024, like you're sort of putting things into play for that. I'm always really interested in, when's the best time to start promoting and selling tickets for next year's event? Is it before this year's has even happened? Is it during, or do you take a breath after this year's event, figure out what went right, what went wrong, and then start trying to promote and sell? What works for you?
I think it depends. I think for us specifically with Reggae Rise Up, it's a little bit different in the sense that our team's been together a really long time. Our fans have been together a really long time. We're kind of getting into that 10-year territory. We're not quite celebrating it yet, but in Tampa, St. Pete market. But there's fans that have been there since the beginning, since the first festival at Raymond James Stadium, when first Florida festival at Raymond James, when it poured rain, and they've been to every single one. And then they're also going to, say our Maryland festival, they're going to our Vegas festival. And so with that, I think for us, the magic of we try to announce the next year's dates at the festival. And then immediately after the festival, we try to send a sincere thank you to our fans for making it all possible. And then generally speaking, ideally for us is we like to open up a small allotment of loyalty tickets right after the event. We don't want to oversell that. We don't, there's still a lot of people, even some loyal fans, and I don't blame them. They don't want to buy a ticket without seeing a lineup, right? At the same time, though, we work really hard to keep everything fresh. But there's a general understanding with Reggae Rise Up of the type of lineup. And we will always say, buying a ticket for Reggae Rise Up is not about buying a ticket to a specific artist at a specific time, right? It's it's buying a ticket to the festival experience. That being said, yeah, the ideal goal is for us, and I think our perfect system with that is to have a successful festival. Towards the end of the festival is when we like to announce the dates. Shortly after the festival, give people just a time to get home and wash their clothes and unpack and digest the weekend they had, and then send our thank yous and our highlights and open up a small allotment of loyalty tickets. So for us, that's kind of the model, and we get people thinking, and then we start to pick that conversation up again as we get closer to announcing a lineup, right? And you don't necessarily want to go, let's say you do, we'll call it a second loyalty sale, or at that point it's your early bird sale. For us, we don't necessarily want to release another allotment of tickets too far away from when we're going to have a lineup announcement, because then it starts to get stale. And so the idea for us is to use those loyalty, early bird, whatever you will, sale pots to drive enthusiasm for what's coming next, and to try and carry momentum throughout the cycle. I think there's a bit of a difference, maybe a first-time event or first-time doing an event in a new market or in a new venue or with a new team. That's where, sometimes even if you've got dates confirmed and where you're going next year, and maybe talent's already started trying to book and but it still would make sense sometimes to say, okay, we're going to take a breath. And as you said, like, we're going to regroup with the team and debrief from this. We're going to figure out what worked, what didn't, and we're going to make sure that before we go back out into the world, we've got a very clear plan to capitalize on what works and improve what didn't.
Very last thing, you said that growing up, reggae was important to you, and now you're working on this festival, Reggae Rise Up. Have there been artists that you've been able to work with on Reggae Rise Up that were really important to you growing up, that it was almost like a bit of a pinch me moment to be involved with something that these people were going to be playing on?
There were absolutely a few. Being a Jew from outside of Philly, working with Modest Yahoo and getting to work with him over a period of time was something that was really cool to me, right? Like, he was kind of coming out as I was maturing a bit and getting to the point where we are friendly and exchange messages and and that I actually it was really, talk about full circle, right? You talk about one of the most important moments. I was actually taking a photo of him and our friend Trevor Hall at the Maryland Festival last year, our first year, and it's something I've done so many times, just walking backwards with the camera, shooting a photo with two guys that I know and love and respect, and then just boom, fell through a hole in the stage, and just all the way down, smacked my chin on the lid of the stage, and hit my leg on a piece of rebar, and so talk about working with an artist that was kind of a full circle moment, and then becoming friends, and then falling through a hole right in front of him. But yeah, that was one.
Okay?
I walked it off for a couple of days, but yeah, my whole leg was purple. It was like it was the first day of the festival too. My whole leg was just like, looked like it needed to be amputated. It hurt, and it looked even worse than it hurt. Another one was Dispatch for me. We had them headline, I think it was Utah 2019. The last year we did Utah as a formal festival. I grew up on them, and there's a reggae adjacent band that plays in, when we talk about the domestic reggae scene, and getting to connect with them after quite literally growing up on their music, and have them headline, Sunday night of what became the last, or at that point the last formal festival in Utah. Like, it was a really cool moment. And sometimes the first impressions, right? Like, it's not all reggae, man. We obviously he's grown a bit, but we had Charlie Crockett at Soundwell, and that's one that we actually went up. He was playing a festival up in Montana under the Big Sky ahead of that, and so Joey and myself and a couple other friends went up, wound up seeing him there. The agent was a friend, and wound up seeing him there and talking, and and he took my phone, he FaceTimed my mom, who's a huge fan, and said hello. And then we pretty much, drove back together, if you will, and he played Soundwell the night after the festival, and so we all came back, and I got to bring my mom, and we just sat back there and talked, and his journey in music and that. And since then, he's outgrown our venues. Are hoping to get him at something again soon. But yeah, it's like sometimes the first impressions too, where you're a fan of music, and then something around a show really establishes this connection that you'll never forget. So it's, I'm still here doing this, working this side, but I'm also a fan through and through.
Nice. Ben, thanks so much for all your time and for sharing all those insights.
Hey man, I talk way too much. So just cut half that shit out and I'll be good.
That was great. Honestly, that was great. It was so nice to talk to you, man, and for sharing all that. It's really interesting. I appreciate it.